Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the Audit and Risk Committee of Waverley Borough Council. I am Councillor Julian Spence. I'm chair of this committee. The committee is being televised, and I would ask the people present to be clear when you speak and to be brief in your comments, please. Before we begin, I would just like to welcome some of the new members of the committee, Councillor Barker-Lomax, Councillor Earwicker, and Councillor Higgins. Welcome to this this committee, and we look forward to your contributions, which I think will be very valuable. Thank you. Before we commence, if I could just ask the officers present to identify themselves.
Mavis Amuzuakwe, Financial Services Manager and Deputy Section 151 for Waverley. Thank you.
Iona Bond, Deputy Head of Southern Internal Audit Partnership, and I'm the Strategic Lead for the Waverley Borough Council Internal Audit Plan.
Grace DaCosta, Graduate Management Trainee at Waverley.
Linda Frame, IT Manager.
Robin Taylor, Assistant Director for Organisational Development for Waverley and Guildford Borough Councils.
Good evening. Hi, my name's Luke. I'm the Corporate Strategy and Performance Manager at Guildford Borough Council. Thank you for having me today as a guest at this meeting. And my team and the team at Waverley are working together on all matters with risk, hence why I'm here this evening. Thank you.
Indeed. Thank you very much for coming along.
Rochelle Tapping, Borough Solicitor and Deputy Monitoring Officer.
Kimberly Sohn, Senior Democratic Services Officer and Clerk in the meeting.
Thank you all. Kimberly, do we have any apologies for absence?
We have apologies from Councillor Maxine Gale.
Thank you. So moving on to the agenda, item 2 is to confirm the minutes of the meeting that was held on the 25th of March. Those minutes have been published on the council's website. Do I have a motion to approve and confirm those minutes? And seconded. Thank you. Kimberly, do we have any disclosure of interests?
None given prior to the meeting, Chair.
And any from anyone? I'm not hearing any. Thank you. Item 4, questions by members of the public. Kimberly?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. And questions from members?
None received, Chair.
Thank you very much. So that takes us to item 6, which is the blowing policy, where this committee is being asked to adopt the proposed whistleblowing policy as set out in the appendix here. And do I have an officer who's just going to present us through this? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Good evening, in fact. Okay, so members are asked to adopt the proposed revised whistleblowing policy, which is set out at Appendix 1. The policy is to encourage staff to report suspected wrongdoing, to raise concerns with the council as opposed to other bodies elsewhere, to provide staff with guidance as to how to raise their concerns, and also to reassure staff that they won't be victimised or disadvantaged as a result of their disclosure. This council is committed to integrity and honesty, and that is the expectation of staff also. The policy was last reviewed in 2019. The next review will be in 2026. The portfolio holder for organisational development and governance and the leader of the council have been consulted on the draft policies. It is part of the tours for this committee to approve the policy as it sits within your remit. The committee will note that the reporting lines has changed as opposed to the reporting lines in the previous policy. So now any report should be received by the monitoring officer. Previously, it was a combination of senior officers. The committee will also note that the policy aligns with the Guildford whistleblowing policy, and there are some local differences as applicable, but this aligns with collaboration and harmonisation. I therefore recommend the policy to the committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, any questions or comments on this report? Councillor Higgins.
Thank you, Chair. It sort of had similarities to the 2019 whistleblowing policy, but was different in many ways. And one of the points I was picking up on was in terms of possible contact points at the end of sort of section 17. It just gives a summary of who they could contact. In the 2019 policy, actually it goes a lot further in terms of giving those details. I was just wondering was there any reason why we didn't include those?
Thank you, Member. So it's as you can imagine, it's quite a sensitive nature, whistleblowing concerned, and centrally the monitoring officer is best placed to pick up those issues, and where it's difficult for the monitoring officer to do so, for example, in situations of conflicts of interest, it will be picked up by the deputy monitoring officer. So it's usual and it's good practice that it sits with the most senior legal officer for the council.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I accept it. It goes immediately internally to the monitoring officer, but it was more to do with external disclosures. It goes, if you're dissatisfied, the possible contact points are, I mean, it goes to relevant counsellor and it goes all the way through to a charity called Protect. And it actually had in the 2019 policy, all details, email addresses, telephone numbers, addresses, that sort of thing.
Thank you. And so I'd say that in response to that, for example, the police, that we would know the number for the police, but the relevant counsellors as well, they could be, the details could be easily obtainable, but actually it's easier because if you can imagine transition arrangements with changes of personnel and members, it's probably easier to have no names and contact details in the document.
Councillor Davison.
Thank you, Chair. One small editorial point to my way before I ask my question. Appendix 1 of Appendix 1 is got a repetition. But don't worry, you can fix that with a little bit of editing later. The question I've got a couple of questions. One is relating to the alignment with Guildford. Could you illuminate the committee as to any possible significant differences between what Waverley and Godalming and Guildford have in their policies? And the other question I got is based on my own past experience in the wide world, was that we had an external monitoring, well, not monitoring officer, an external body, solicitor or law firm, which was used to receive possible complaints or whistleblowing. Is that something which was considered by the executive or yourself in this process?
Thank you. So remember your first question, what I can do is ask for a tracked change version to be supplied to the committee via email, because there isn't actually a document that shows that for the committee today. So it's an oversight on our part, but we will get that to the committee. In relation to your second question, there is a discretion to go externally direct. So there is no obligation in law for the whistleblowing to come to the monitoring officer in the first instance in any event. So that discretion still exists.
Councillor Beeman.
Yeah, how do we actually publicise that discretion? I mean, how do people want to, how can they contact external
Thank you. So I'm just going to review and see what section it's covered into because it should actually be spelt out. So bear with me one moment while I just look for that. It's the section 17, it says it. So it says it. It's the second paragraph. Sorry, third paragraph starting however.
Just, yeah, so Councillor Davison.
If I could just add on to my comment about using an external agency for receiving whistleblowing concerns or concerns about or complaints about staff or the procedures here. The reason why my previous companies did this was to ensure that it was a single point of contact outside. There was no option. You always went to this one single organization to raise concerns, which made it much simpler in many respects. But I can understand that is a cost and possibly something which you don't want to, that's not a route you want to go down.
Point observed. Thank you, Councillor.
Okay. Also, if I could ask a couple of questions on here. One was I had a concern at the last paragraph of point 8 on harassment and victimization, which basically says if an individual is unsure as to whether to raise a concern formally, they should discuss the issue with their line manager, assistant director, and so forth. That gave me some concerns that were you asking staff to talk to their immediate bosses, and the problem might be to do with them. So I felt that language should perhaps be toned down a bit. It also didn't accommodate what happened. It's not just officers who may do whistleblowing. I think members might and third-party contractors might. So how would that be dealt with?
Thank you, Chair. So I think the first point you raised could probably be addressed with the word as applicable at the end of the sentence, perhaps. But I can take that back.
That would satisfy me. I just don't want the staff to feel there is an obligation to speak to their line manager if they've got a concern. There shouldn't be an obligation. That should be entirely voluntary, and there should be an alternative approach, which they could go to the monitoring officer.
Yeah, happy for that change to be made.
Thank you. Then I had on item 16 a couple of comments here because this introduces some responsibilities both for me as the chair of the committee and for members generally. So that it says the monitoring officer will inform the leader of the council and the chair of the audit and risk committee, presumably when there has been an investigation, but it doesn't say when we will be informed. Hitherto, of course, we've not had that obligation or requirement. So I would like to have seen the word like said promptly, if that's what the case was. And so, and then the second point, a few bullets further down, the monitoring officer will report the outcome of the investigation to the audit and risk committee. In the next agenda item, members, we have an example of that report, and I'd ask you all just to consider whether the detail that we're seeing there is adequate to give you the assurance of the promptness and the thoroughness of an investigation, which is what I think we're being asked to give our assurance or be assured on. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. So in relation to the first comment, happy to put the word promptly into the revised draft. In relation to the second point, I think we can only probably come to that when we're on the second
Indeed, I
item.
just wanted to make aware that it was in the policy. It's not just a report. So we do need to be comfortable with the nature of the report we receive. Councillor Beeman.
As a matter of interest, how many incidents of whistleblowing have taken place in Waverley over the past year?
So I didn't quite catch that.
I didn't catch it.
How many?
As a matter of interest, how many incidents of whistleblowing have taken place over the past year in Waverley?
Thank you, Councillor. So it's actually the second report that we're going to consider tonight, which details that information for you, and it's 2.
So does any other member have any questions or concerns? If not, let us turn to the recommendation, which is to adopt this proposed whistleblowing policy. And do I have a proposal?
Subject to
Sorry?
subject to the amendments
Oh,
that you suggested.
indeed, yeah, indeed, subject to the amendments that we have just spoken about. Do I have a motion to approve this report? And seconded? Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you, members. That's unanimous. Which swiftly moves us on to the actual whistleblowing report itself. And again, here we are being asked to recommend to the council that they approve the contents of the whistleblowing report to satisfy themselves that the governance arrangements are operating effectively and to make any recommendations for improvement and to review the register on an annual basis. Would you like to comment?
Thank you, Chair. So members would have heard the recommendations. I think the second recommendation in particularly would probably address the Chair's second question tonight in relation to the adequacy of the information that is before you in that report. If I turn to that appendix, members will see that it has been redacted to protect confidential information. And members will see that there were 2 allegations, one that was received in March 2024, and the outcome was no evidence of wrongdoing found. And the second was February 2024, and the investigation is ongoing. Just a reminder to members that we are in public session, and so there's a limit to what we may or may not be able to discuss tonight about what you have in front of you. Happy to take any questions.
Members, Councillor Barker-Lomax.
Yeah, just to get a perspective, so I noticed that the 2 whistleblowing events here relate to the same person, so head of paid services. Is the complainant also the same person? Because I would look at it differently if it was the same person just coming back time and again, whereas if we've got multiple people complaining about the same person, in my mind, the risk is greater.
So, Councillor, I may be corrected here. I think it's the service area rather than the individual officer that's being referred to as the head of paid service. Is that correct?
That's right. But to address the second part of your question, perhaps what is needed is a second column that actually identifies whether or not this is somebody that's received a previous complaint. On another occasion. So I think we can make an addition to the column to reflect your wishes, member.
Great, thank you.
My question here was on the second one where it says investigation ongoing. I think in order to get the assurance that it's being dealt with the promptness that it deserves, some form of timescale would be put on there. So if it was received in February, the investigation commenced March or wherever. So we need to have that, I think.
So Chair, would it be adequate to reflect the length of the investigation, i.e. 7 weeks? Would that address?
I'll be happy with that. Thank you.
Happy to amend the table going forward.
Any other questions on this report? In which case, Councillor Davidson.
Just a bit of clarification as to who receives this. Does this have to go to full council or is it only to the audit committee?
To the audit committee.
Okay. Unless, of course, I guess there's a very serious incident, in which case the full council would need to be made aware.
Yes, yes, and that will be as per the whistleblowing policy reporting rights.
Okay, fine. Thank you for the.
Sorry, I failed to quite follow that. So you are saying we are recommending that this report to the council?
No, Chair. So in appropriate incidences where there is a need for the full council to know this type of information, it will be as applicable, but not this report.
Okay, thank you. So may I move to the recommendation, which is that this committee recommends that the council approves to review the contents of this annual whistleblowing report to satisfy themselves that the government's arrangements are operating effectively, to make any recommendations for improvement and to review the whistleblowing register on an annual basis. So with the amendments that we have suggested, I'd ask for an approval.
You mentioned council, Chair, but council's not involved in this stage.
Sorry?
You mentioned the council, but the council's not involved in this stage, so it's a recommendation as is.
That's not the case.
This is a recommendation that we have.
No. My apologies. I'm reading apparently the wrong piece of paper. So yes, so just to correct that, the committee is recommended to review the contents of the annual whistling report to satisfying itself that the government's arrangements are operating effectively and to make any recommendations for improvement. So if I could have a motion to make that recommendation, please.
Additional comments asked for by.
Indeed. Thank you. Thank you. So all approved? Thank you. Which leads us on to item 8, the fraud investigation report. Jose, I think you are on line. And I apologize for not having introduced you earlier on. Jose, would you like to briefly go through the report and what the recommendations to this committee are?
Thank you, Councillor. Good evening, everyone. The figures that I'm giving you tonight are for this financial year, so from April to date. So currently we've recovered 2 tenancies in the past 2 months, and we've also managed to cancel a right to buy application, and from that we recovered the tenancy, and then we took a matter to court and managed to get possession at court of the property. And at the moment we have 2 pending court cases next month, which we hope to recover those properties too. And those are our outcomes to date.
Good, thank you very much. councillors, members, do you have any questions for Jose on this report? Councillor Barker Lomax.
Yeah, thank you. On page 41, I I was analysing the numbers on the table there, and I'm not sure if I read them correctly. Can I please check? Are we seeing a drop in cases started, like a significant drop?
That's because this is for the new financial year. It hasn't carried the figures over from last year.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I saw the 1st April to 6th June piece, but so my understanding is in 20 to 21 we had 131 cases started, and then in subsequent years down to 70 and 75.
In 2021, we were still reviewing. There were certain aspects of application that we were reviewing that we no longer do at the moment.
So what's that? What are we not reviewing in terms of the fraud?
At that stage, we were reviewing mutual exchanges. So every mutual exchange that came in, application that came in, we would review each one. But it wasn't any. There were no successes coming out of it, so it wasn't viable anymore.
So it wasn't worth the money or the resources?
No, it wasn't.
Okay, and so then the non-mutual exchange cases are sort of staying at a similar level to what they were 2 years ago?
Yes, they've actually increased, especially the reports from the public coming in through our report fraud line. Those have increased significantly.
Yes, I saw that. That looked really heartening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Higgins.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a newbie question, really, but positive outcomes. Is that where there's been an identified fraud, or what number is that relating to? What's a positive outcome?
Well, the outcomes would be, yes, we've identified a fraud and we've managed to get either recovered a tenancy or cancelled an application. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
Any other questions? For Jose, I said I would like to add my appreciation for the work done, and certainly when you look at the numbers, it's valuable work, and please keep it up.
Thank you.
So could I ask the committee to note the results of this report as set out? Thank you. Apologies for that. Thank you very much. So if we can move to item 9, which is a report on the staff turnover and retention report for the new council members. This stems from a request, I think, from Councillor Beeman a couple of meetings ago, where the committee were concerned of the risk that the council was running from its ability to retain staff. And so we've asked for this report, and if I could turn it over to the officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We're joined online by John Formby, who's the Council's Human Resources Manager. And really, in addition to what you said, all I want to say is a big thank you to John for picking up on this piece of work. Obviously, it is something the committee is interested in. It's also something which the Overview and Scrutiny Resources Committee has been interested in, has set up a subcommittee, and some great work done in that subcommittee. So really pleased to see it on the agenda today. And Chair, if you're happy to ask John Formby to introduce, that would be brilliant. Thank you very much.
Officer Formby.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Robin, as well. So what I've set out in that report is a bit of a background on the current turnover figures. So what you've got in front of you is the year ending to the 31st of March 2024. These have been produced recently in relation to our workforce profile. And in the last 12 months, we've had a slight decrease in overall turnover from 15.75 in the year 2022-2023 to 15.37 in the previous year from 23 to 24. We've also seen a quite significant decrease in voluntary turnover during that period. In the data here, each year we look at turnover at other councils and across industry generally by looking at various surveys, including one by Brightmine, which consulted a survey this last year of 390 different organisations. They found that across all organisations across the country, the turnover rate was 14.4, and they also break it down into other categories, including public sector, currently at 13.55, which is obviously relevant for us, and also organisations in the sort of 250 to 999, which is currently running at 14.9. So all of these are sort of reducing. Our turnover is reducing in line with that. As Robin Taylor just mentioned there, we've been doing some additional work and a subgroup on overview and scrutiny, including with Councillor Barker Lomax and Councillor Davidson, who are in this meeting today. At the moment, we've produced data on turnover on a quarterly basis. And what we've agreed as part of our subgroups over the last 12 months is to increase the data and expand that on turnover in particular. And we're now going to be looking at identifying the top 5 highest areas of turnover on a quarterly basis and identifying with that some explanatory comments on why the turnover may have gone up in those areas and also what plans we've got in place are relevant to address that. And we'll be working with the relevant assistant director and managers in those areas. So that will be coming up in Q1 for the first set of quarterly statistics, and that will be something that we'll continue to monitor and we'll bring back to overview and scrutiny and to this committee chair as well if you would wish us to in the future. What I've also set out is a little bit of information about what else we do in regard to turnover. So all leavers are currently asked to complete a leavers feedback survey. That is a voluntary survey. We don't make that a compulsory process, but we do ask all leavers to complete that. And we do also follow up in person with a number of leavers as well, if they should wish for a interview on that. The retention has been a challenge. You'll be well aware in the local government sector, particularly over a number of years. One of the areas that we've done a lot of work on is around recruitment and retention of young people. Over the last 12 months at Waverley, we've put into place a young employees network, and actually we're looking at extending that across Waverley and Guildford over the next 12 months. This current network meets on a regular basis and is for members of staff at Waverley 29 and under. This isn't the only thing we're doing, but this is a particular area where we wanted to attract new staff in to the council, and that group has been involved in a range of things, including input into college and career fair attendance, into how we might use social media for recruitment purposes, different interest groups and social activities, looking at language and communication, and the working experience at Waverley Borough Council. We've also begun a project recently with a comms team called HR in the Community, where we're looking to connect with a range of different community groups using physical and digital media and the Commonplace platform, which has been recently introduced. That's a project we're hoping to formally launch later this year in terms of our outputs. And the aim of that is to go out as well into the community and use HR knowledge to assist residents with help and support in regard to their own process around job interviews. So it's a twofold project to reach groups that we haven't reached before in the borough in terms of job opportunities, but also to share some of our knowledge with residents. And we've also done some particular work with areas that had higher turnover in the last 12 months, such as planning and development. We've worked with the assistant director in there to look at a number of projects, including producing a planning salary benchmarking exercise. We're supporting them with their restructuring process. We've worked very recently in a recruitment campaign to try and increase the number of employees within planning and reduce the number of contractors. Currently, from the recent recruitment, we've offered to 5 staff in that area who will come in to replace contractors, and we'll be going out again in due course for that. And we also work with the groups around training and support in particular challenging areas like planning and housing around teamwork and resilience to help support those staff through difficult times. So this report just really sets out the current position and a number of things that we've been working on, both in terms of overview and scrutiny, but also practically what sort of processes we put in place to reduce and mitigate the risk in relation to turnover. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Councillor Beeman.
Thank you very much. I think it's very helpful. But I do have a question. Does this include or exclude contract staff who may be on fixed term contracts?
Yes, the overall turnover figure would relate to staff. If they were in a permanent position, it would relate to staff, including contractors in the report.
Councillor Higgins.
Thank you, Officer Formby, for the report, and it's great to see that there will be further data broken out in terms of, I think, as Councillor Beeman touched on, contractors, agency staff, that goes to overview the ONS committee, I think in Q1, if that's correct, because I think that probably the reliance on agency staff is a risk which we need to keep an eye on. In terms of the leavers feedback survey, particularly interested in that. I was just wondering in terms of what percentage of those feedback surveys are actually completed from leavers, do you know?
Thank you, Councillor Higgins. I don't have a figure on that, but I can come back and confirm that for you.
Thank you. And I was just wondering what was the idea behind it being voluntary and anonymous rather than just getting it mandatory, sort of almost like a leavers checklist of things, returning equipment and actually doing the survey?
I guess there's two ways of looking at that. Sorry. Generally, it's quite hard to make this process a compulsory one because of the nature of where it's happening in the employment journey. So we've sort of taken the opportunity to encourage, I think, rather than make it compulsory. And every leaver receives a letter which offers them a link to complete this survey, and then an opportunity should they wish to follow that up. If we make it compulsory, the challenge there, I think, is how we would enforce that at that stage with an employee or a contractor about to leave us. It's a very difficult one, sort of outside of our control, to be able to make it a compulsory process. I've not generally seen that in practice in other organisations because of the nature of the challenge of where it happens in that employment journey, which is sort of different from when somebody joins us as a new employee. But happy to take it away and look at that and see if there's other examples of how we might do that.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, in my business, I also do a survey for leavers, and it is valuable information. I don't think I'd appreciate when you do general surveys, being anonymous is helpful, because especially for an existing employee, I think at the point they're leaving, actually, I think that they're more than willing to be as open as they want to be, because they're obviously leaving. And I think that the concern I had in terms of it being anonymous is that you're doing a lot of good work with younger employees and engagement. I think if you're seeing a high percentage of young people leaving, getting their feedback and knowing these are young people who are leaving, what's the common denominator there might be helpful. It's just my thoughts, but thank you, Officer Formby.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Beeman.
Are there any face-to-face exit interviews undertaken, or is it just by survey?
Thank you. I think was the question, have any exit interviews been undertaken?
Face, yes.
Yes, there have been. Yeah, there have been a number undertaken. I've actually undertaken some myself. When they're undertaken, they're either done by the line manager in relation to the role, or the option to speak to me as the HR manager is the normal process. Again, I don't have a figure, but I can confirm for you that if you wish.
Chair, just to clarify, the interviews can be face-to-face or online, depending on the way that the officer works and their preference. The key thing from our point of view is getting the information.
Officer Formby, if I could ask you a question. First of all, thank you very much for the report. I'm also very conscious of the overlap and trying to avoid an overlap between what ONS does and what we look at. We're here mainly to seek assurance that the policies and procedures to manage the risk are in place. And now, to me, a very important part of that is the it's your role, and the support and engagement that you get from senior management. And I was wondering if there are any things that you can, comments you'd like to give us to give us assurance that, you know, any concerns or approach that you have that is fully engaged with senior management, and particularly, you know, what visibility do you have? Do you attend the management board, or do you have specific meetings with the CEO? Anything that gives us a sense of, right, how the council is approaching this issue or this risk with the appropriate seriousness. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. There isn't a specific meeting as such, but there is a monthly meeting that I would have with Robin in conjunction with the Chief Executive, and we would certainly raise issues like this if there was a concern at that meeting. It's also a topic that has been raised in the past, and we would raise with the managers group at Waverley. The managers group consists of all of our sort of tier 4 managers upwards, from line managers through assistant directors and strategic directors. So when we were putting in place the new levers process, for example, that was something that we would bring to that meeting to make them aware of the process and give them the background of why that was changing. So those are the two areas, I think, where we would engage on this particular subject if there was changes or concerns. In addition to that, we would have, as I mentioned, ad hoc meetings if we highlighted a particular area with high turnover, where we would arrange meetings at first with the relevant assistant director to talk to them and understand the challenges and how best we could support them. Thank you.
Anything you would like to add just to that?
Just to supplement that, Chair, we have sort of 2 committees, one formally constituted and one just part of our working practices. The Joint Negotiating Committee, where as well as looking at the annual pay award, there's a number of staffing issues which can be dealt with by representatives from the council and from the employer. And the other is the Joint Consultative Committee, which is an internal meeting that John and I attend along with the Chief Executive, which is a forum for discussing matters with unison and union representatives representing staff. So sort of two meetings where we can pick up some of these key issues, and certainly, you know, the issues that have been discussed tonight are both picked up in those forums.
Thank you. Any further questions on this agenda item? Councillor Davidson.
It's more of a comment and a request for some assurance. One of the things which you feed back in your report, John, is on the Young Employees Network. And I think that is absolutely excellent that we are encouraging younger staff to work with us and to be retained longer term. It costs resources, of course, to run that. And possibly, Robin, can you assure us that adequate resources are being put into ensuring that program is run effectively?
Through you, Chair, I can certainly give you reassurance that at the highest level in the council, namely the Chief Executive, it's very well supported. What is given is time and encouragement. It's not something, you know, all of the officers involved, it's part of their day job, you know, to run this, and actually they take the lead in running it. So what is offered is encouragement, endorsement, and making sure that, you know, this can be part of those officers who are involved as part of their working day. There's no particular budget attached to that network or any other network. Clearly, if anything arose where there was a need for, you know, if there was a cost, then we could look at that separately under the normal budget provisions, but the networks themselves aren't any cost at the point of happening.
May I just add something?
Indeed.
Thank you. No, I just wanted to say, as she's present as well in this meeting, Grace Da Costa, who's the management trainee, has also been put an incredible amount of work into the Young Employees Network. I just wanted to put that on record, and note, and particularly she's here today in this meeting, to say my thank you to her. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hearing no other questions, so I think we're just noting that report Thank you very much. So moving on to the next agenda item, Robin, it's, I think, continuing with you. It's the risk management update. And if you'd like to take us through the framework and where we are with the enhancing of our risk management framework. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to say too much because Grace has joined us this evening to present the report, so I don't want to steal any of her thunder, except I will just say a big thank you to Grace for the work that she's been doing to help the council take forward this area of work. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Robin, as well. So we've brought this report to you today because risk management is a standing item on the committee agenda, and also as part of the risk management framework that we've now endorsed, we need to report to the committee the corporate risk register and any updates on risk management as well. So since the last committee, officers have mapped and identified have gone through that process to identify key corporate risks, and that's set out in the appendix. This will form the idea of this is that this will form the basis of the corporate risk register, and that was those risks we took to C&B in April, and they were endorsed by C&B. So now we've brought them to committee, and that's part of our process of reviewing the corporate risk register. So we just wanted to note that for the next committee in September, we will bring a completed corporate risk register along with mitigations and RAG ratings as well. And we're also in the process of reviewing the risk management strategy with Guildford colleagues as well. So Luke's here today. So Luke was leading on that project, and we're making sure that we're adhering to kind of best practice and maintaining an effective risk management process as well. And we will continue to report to C&B on a monthly basis at the performance and risk C&B. And for the next committee in September, a risk management group will be set up at Waverley, similar to what Guildford have at the moment, a risk management group, and that will be set up to measure performance of the risk management framework. So that's what will be completed by officers to bring to the next committee in September. And the report is asking this committee to note the progress that officers have made with risk management and the next steps that we've set out for September committee.
Thank you for that. Members, any questions or okay, councillors, Barkham at Lomax.
So I'm not sure. I'm not sure. So I might be wrong in asking this question, but so given that Guildford Borough Council is subject to investigation for fraud of pretty large sums of money, and given that this has already had an impact on some of our officers, like some are on long-term gardening leave because of something that happened in Guildford, and they've got the twin role here, and so it was having to spend, lots of money keeping someone away from the office because of something that happened at Guildford. Should we not have a section in our risk register that relates specifically to the collaboration? I think there's massive risks over there, and we should look at it and actually shine a torch on it specifically.
Councillor, I think you make a very valid point. And in the past, we have talked about having a deep dive session on the risk register, going through it, which we can't really do in the formal committee. And I'd like to suggest that the committee has an informal meeting simply looking at that risk register, to picking up those sorts of points where we think there may be things missing that should be on there, and give the officers the opportunity to then explain why they're not, or why they may be somewhere else. And I think that's, there's there's a great raft. What I see here is the, how I say, the bones of the main strategic risks. But we'll want to, I think, a deeper dive on those.
Chairman, Councillor Barker-Lomax, thank you for the question. Obviously, what you've got here in this report is risk management at Waverley still a work in progress. It's a significant step forward. One of the reasons why Waverley has looked to, compare its approach with Guildford and to share best practice, and for the two councils to try and work together on their approaches respectively to risk management, is because the collaboration is in place, but also because actually the internal audit report recommended taking that approach. And I think it's a good idea to do so. So you've got a list here of risks. What you don't have at the moment is all of the identification of the level of the risk, the impact of the risk, how that'll be managed. That's what will be coming to future meetings of this committee. You'll remember when I spoke at a previous committee, one of the issues we've had has been lack of officer resource. That's why I'm so pleased that we've had Grace supporting in the interim, and also Luke Harvey from Guildford Borough Council supporting as well, because we have been dealing with the fact that we've had that limited officer resource. In terms of your specific point around the Guildford Waverley collaboration and whether that's a risk that should be noted, it's two things really. One is that you see it is in the list of risks here within these papers, but also there is a specific risk register for the collaboration, a whole separate risk register. When the councils both set up the joint governance committee at the outset of the partnership between the two councils, it set up two joint committees, and one of those was the joint governance committee. And that committee, which has representatives from both of the two councils on it, elected members from both councils on it, is specifically charged with reviewing on a regular basis any risk associated with the collaboration. And so that happens, I think on a 6-monthly basis, that risk register goes to the joint governance committee. Anything which then needs to be escalated from that into the corporate risk register will be escalated into the corporate risk register. So that's a sort of a long and wordy way of agreeing with you that because the collaboration is a significant policy initiative for Waverley Borough Council, of course it should be recognised within our risk register. It is, and in fact there's a whole separate programme register which looks at all the specific iterations of that risk.
Thank you.
Councillor.
Thank you. And yes, I mean, fabulous work, and really very, very impressed with the quality of work here. Just a couple of further points here. So the risk that I see referred to with regards to the collaboration is, there is a risk that the collaboration does not meet its objectives or is not politically supported. And that may well be the case, but it seems to me, given the context of the Guildford Borough Council's financial situation at the moment, that sort of missing the huge elephant in the room. That's one point. And, we need to be looking at cost, distraction time from management, from being able to do the job in Waverley, because they're all firefighting in Guildford, all sorts of things there. The other thing is that given the acuteness of the situation in Guildford, I would just question, is a 6-monthly cadence enough? Or should we be going for quarterly? When we've got well over 10 million of fraud and embezzlement from what I've read in the press. I don't know if it's true, but it's what I've read in the press. Should there not be a higher cadence of reporting of the risk to Waverley from that collaboration? I would suggest maybe we go quarterly.
So Chairman, thank you for that question. I think the 6 monthly is the minimum amount of time, minimum frequency that it goes back to that joint governance committee. Just to make the point, that's not the only occasion when the risks are being looked at. It's actually just the milestone where it's looked at in a public committee by the councillors themselves. There was also a subcommittee set up by the joint governance committee to specifically do some further detailed work on the risk register for the collaboration. Some of the work I've been doing with my colleague Luke Harvey from Guildford Borough Council, it's a reminder that we a risk framework isn't just about any risk register. So the risk register that goes to the Joint Governance Committee is a snapshot in time of how the two authorities are measuring the risk of that partnership. But that's not the only time that those risks are looked at. There's detailed work being done by officers, including Grace, in between those committee sessions, and also the risks that are articulated within that risk register are clearly looked at by the Council's joint management team, and obviously by the memberships of the two organisations. But that 6 monthly review as a minimum is the point where in public those councillors are coming together to review how the risk register looks at the moment.
Thank you for that. Councillor, I'd also add that while a 6 monthly review may or may not be the right time, this committee can always ask for a deep dive on a particular area, just as we've done on the retention of staff issue, to get a better understanding of the controls that are in place to mitigate or manage that risk.
Thank you. So how do we make that informal process? How do we kick it off? I just asked for a meeting.
Sorry, can we?
So I think you said it had to be an informal process if we were going to do a deep dive. So how do you best suggest?
No, particular deep dives can be done as we just had on the on staff retention in the committee. But I think just from the logistics, going through 40 risks one by one in a formal committee is quite difficult, and it's often better to do that where we can all sit down on a more informal basis, and then that meeting itself will be reported to this committee.
Wonderful. I'd love to be part of that committee.
Absolutely. Can I just add a couple of comments here? We're being asked to note the progress with this risk management framework. I actually think that this committee should be a little bit more than noting the progress. I think the framework we've got here is a significant step forward, and I congratulate Grace and the officers on that. But I think it's something we should be endorsing rather than just noting. I'm conscious that it's been endorsed by management, but if the committee so feels, I think we should be endorsing that. So I would propose an amendment to that motion. That's one point. The other point that I have here is, while I welcome a lot of that's in here, there is still, to my mind, too much of we will be doing something rather than things have happened. I'm very conscious of the time elapsed since the audit report, and I would personally like to see this speeded up. The risk management group will be set up. I think it has to be set up. I'd like to see who the chair of that is. And we need to have firmer dates on when the corporate risk register will be reported to this committee. It's a question I'd have for other members of the committee, whether they are happy or whether you are happy with the progress that's being made. Do you feel that officers are giving risk management the appropriate urgency? Councillor Davison.
I'm rather supportive of what you've just been saying. It's like any project. It needs to have a proper schedule and a delivery plan within it. And I think that doesn't appear to be there, or obviously doesn't appear to be obviously there. So that would be one of why I think, Chair, if we could make that as a strong recommendation back, I would be very supportive of that. And if I may waffle on a little bit further, I feel looking at the document, I'm slightly unsure as who actually owns the risk register, who's responsible for it. Question?
So the risk register is absolutely owned by the leadership of each authority. So in the way that the organisation functions, that means ultimately it's, you know, the council's joint management team headed up by the chief executive. And obviously there is then a link with the executive of this authority, but with input from this committee with a specific view on risk. I hope that answers the question. I mean, in terms of the specific risks, there will always be a risk owner. So, what, you know, one named officer who is the lead officer for dealing with that risk, and that doesn't mean they're dealing with it on their own, but they are the accountable officer for that risk. And Chairman, you'll see this when we come forward with further detail in due course, that the formatting that we're putting together will make it clear when we have the risks identified, exactly who is responsible for those risks in each case. So, you know, in terms of on the officer side, it's collective responsibility of the joint management team led by the chief executive. But in terms of each specific risk, there will always be one officer who leads, with clearly one portfolio holder on the political side.
If I may continue, thank you for that. So as I take it, the chief executive is responsible for getting it done as such. And I understand that the individual areas would be much more departmentally or organizationally responsible for their particular part of that, of the overall register.
Indeed. And part of what you see within the paperwork is the fact that we need to be measuring risk in various ways across the organisation at a service level and then escalating up into a corporate level. Clearly, the chief executive heads up the council's employed workforce, and he's taken a very clear lead on risk management in his new role. So you see that reflected in the report, because one of the things that the council's corporate management board is doing, which is the chief executive, statutory officers and strategic directors, they are having specific sessions of their own meeting as officers where they are looking specifically at performance and risk. And so I'm very satisfied that we have the support that we need as a set of officers in terms of risk management. We're just now putting it into operation. And not that you asked me, Chairman, but in terms of whether or not it's taken too long, yes, I think it has taken too long. I mean, the internal audit report was quite some time ago, and the issues that were raised within it in terms of not having the officer resource to support that going forward, they have been real sticking issues. But I am pleased to see that now we're finally moving ahead with that. And, you know, the commitment from me is that we'll continue to engage with this committee as we move forward with it. So your endorsements, if it comes, is welcome.
And if I can make one further request on the timing, I don't think we as a committee reviewing what is coming up needs to wait until a final completed document is presented to us. I think it would be quite valuable, certainly for our own education, if nothing else, is if we get an early insight into what is probably going to appear on the risk register and have the ability to comment on it.
I mean, through you, Chair, completely agree. That's the reason this is on the agenda in the form it is today, because officers recognised it's not, we recognise it's not yet fully formed, but we wanted to share it with you at the point that it's at right now. So welcome that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Just to follow up on that, then, I think on the report here, it says that on your next steps, and you are talking that the risk management group would have been met by the next audit and risk committee meeting in September. I would like to suggest that we have this deep dive that Councillor Davison has just commented on, that's maybe not the final one, in August, so that is in advance of our meeting. And I would like to see, therefore, that where it says on completion, it will be reported to the committee, ideally targeting September for the meeting for that. And then the revised risk management strategy presented to the committee. Again, I'd like to see that in September. And I'd like to have those as much harder deadlines if possible, because I am conscious that I think things have been slipping and have taken a long time. I know there's a tight deadlines, but we have to insist on them. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think there's some degree of risk with that timescale. I'm not sure whether that's achievable or not. I'm also a little bit concerned about doing a deep dive before this committee's engaged fully on the strategy. So if I can offer that we'll take that offline and see what we can do and come back to you by email, Chair, to suggest a way forward. I would be a little bit concerned about doing the deep dive before we're ready to, but we'll have a look at it and see what can be done.
You can, but I hope you will take on board the sentiments of the committee.
Of course.
So can I then, we have the recommendation here, which was to note the progress made with the risk management and implementing the newly endorsed risk management framework. I would like to propose that the committee endorses the progress made and endorses the risk management framework as presented. And we then note the next steps, and we request a deep dive of the risk register as soon as possible, and preferably in advance of our meeting in September. All those in favour, okay? Thank you very much.
Endorsement, because you want to vote on the endorsement if you're only endorsing the strategy.
This is endorsing.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, what we're asking to endorse the risk management framework that is in the report. Is everyone happy with that? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so on to item 11, the information and data management report. Who's...
Good evening, Chair. Good evening,
Oh,
members.
hello.
Hello, it's Nora Coping. I'm the information manager for the council. I also have with me in the chamber my manager, Linda Frame, from kind of technical advice. So the report has come to you in its first format last September, where we've agreed that we're going to be bringing it to you on annual basis at the June cycle. So here we are, it's June, so we're bringing a report updating you on what have happened, the activity when it comes to information data management practices across the council from April 2023 till end of March 2024. This report includes reflection from different functions. It's not only information data management program, but also I've got support from my colleagues from cybersecurity, information governance and data protection, information, so freedom of information and data transparency. They also contributed to the report. So big thank you to them to provide the information. There have not been a major change to the structure of the report. So as you can see, we have the kind of the two main sections, one telling you about the framework, which kind of remain more or less the same, and the second one updating you on what have happened in the past 12 months and us kind of forecasting what we are planning to do in the next kind of coming year. When it comes to the changes to the framework itself, there has been a change since last time we have seen you. So on the page 87 of your agenda pack, or page 5 of the report itself, you can see that we have actually put forward a different governing structure for IT, data, and digital. So in the past, we had separate governing groups for information, different groups for IT as well. We have never had a specific group for digital aspects as well. as we considered that the organization is changing, the needs of the organization are changing, it just made sense for us to have, instead of siloed conversations, join them together into one meeting to think about the data that our colleagues are working with, which systems they are putting that data in, and then what are the digital opportunities for us to do things better, be more efficient in our processes as well. So what we have put forward as a format is service-specific information, IT, digital, and kind of data groups. And we have already started in February and March with the first cycle of meetings, and we are just at the end of the last cycle of meetings as well. They have been very beneficial, very illuminating. I think our colleagues also appreciated having a forum where they could discuss something very close and near and dear to their line of work. We didn't want to go with something theoretical and impose it on our colleagues. We really want to work with the priorities within the teams. So some teams might be in a process of replacing their systems at the moment. Others might be working on data quality issues. Others might also struggle with, for example, document storage and where to store it, how to kind of handle data well. So we're trying to understand, meet with our colleagues, understand exactly what the needs are within the services, and from then establish the priorities and how we can best support them on their journey going forward. The framework itself is based on information asset ownership and information asset management. So we're trying to establish better approaches and kind of processes and roles within that information asset remit. There's a lot to do. There's lots of training awaiting my colleagues and myself as well, kind of going forward to make sure that people feel comfortable in what they are doing. So that's kind of the main change that happened in the framework itself. We have also restructured our information governance, information rights team. So in the past, we had the separate roles for data protection and freedom of information. And now the team has been created to have 3 officers. We're going to have information governance team leader, who will be looking after information rights officer and also information rights coordinator, hopefully providing a little bit more resilience in that area to make sure that our freedom of information queries are being responded to in a very timely manner. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to leave it here in a kind of form of introduction, and happy to take any questions from the members of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Nora. Any questions or comments for Nora? Councillor Higgins.
Thank you, Nora, for the comprehensive report. It was excellent. And the one thing I was looking at was the data breach statistics. January to May 2023, we had 20, 24. January to May is only 6. So either we've become a lot better at preventing data breaches or people aren't reporting them. How do you ensure that people are reporting rather than just non-reporting and maybe hiding these, because that could be a significant risk to us?
So I think we have a lot of training sessions for our staff too. And the culture is, please do come to us, even if you're not sure if it is a data breach or not data breach. So I think the practices have been established quite well since 2018. This is not my area of work, so usually there is other colleagues who will be dealing with those matters, but the data breaches could happen in a specific time of the year as well. So it's possible that that number would kind of even out throughout the year. I wouldn't say that this is a reflection of people under reporting the data breaches, but if you need a little bit more analytical kind of reassurance from my colleagues, I'm happy to take that question away and bring some information to you offline as well.
Thank you. And just in terms of the presentation of statistics, I know this is an annual report, but it would be helpful maybe in the future that we had broken out to minor, major breaches and any reports to the ICO, if that would be okay.
Thank you. We definitely can do that for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nora. I had a question on the subject access requests. There's a comment there that response time from services when asked to provide the requested data is challenging, and this often makes the compliance rate with response timescale low. What assurances or can you give us that such requests are being handled by the service areas with the appropriate promptness and speed.
So thank you, Chair. Again, this is not my area of expertise or my area of work. We have an information governance team lead. We have an interim role at the moment, so we are waiting for the permanent post to be in place. But I'm very happy to take this question offline and come back to you to provide you with the measures that we currently have and what are the plans for improvement as well.
I think that would be useful because there's an area of risk there, and we'd just like to see that it is being properly managed. Thank you. The other general comment I had is here, we've seen a number of reports this evening, most of which are dovetailing or seem to be dovetailing with Guildford. I can't see anything in this report that is or suggests that there's a lot of talk with Guildford. Is this something that is a purely Waverley exercise, or are you doing this? Is there areas of collaboration and efficiencies that you're looking to have with Guildford?
Yeah, Chair, can I take that question? We're regularly meeting with our Guildford colleagues in terms of IT, information and data and digital, and Guildford have recently employed a cybersecurity analyst. We at Waverley have had a cybersecurity analyst for a number of years. And so we're bringing together those two areas of expertise. So although this report is reflecting Waverley's journey, we're very much in discussions with Guildford.
At this point, would you anticipate any sort of material or significant change to the approach that Waverley's adopted?
In terms of information governance or
in terms of information governance?
Information governance, I don't believe so at the moment.
Good. Thank you.
In terms of cybersecurity, we're all working towards a new cyber assessment framework, which is being brought in for local government. And so we will all be looking towards meeting that cyber assessment framework. So if we can work with our Guildford colleagues in meeting that assessment framework, then then the better for it.
Councillor Davis.
If I may continue with that theme, we are working or increasingly working more closely with our colleagues in Guildford and maybe taking the opportunity of sharing jobs across the organisations. In your assessment, is the security arrangements within the Guildford offices and where staff may be working and having access to our systems adequate, or to our standard?
Chair, I probably can't answer that question in this meeting.
Chairman, so with respect, Councillor, it's a very, very fair question, but I don't think it's a question for a Waverley Borough Council committee. It's probably a question for a Guildford committee. Just to reiterate what my colleague Linda said, there are there are discussions ongoing between the teams in both authorities to compare best practice, share best practice, compare our approaches. And as Linda said, we're both working towards the same national standards. But I don't think it would be right or appropriate for us to comment in this committee about Guildford's approach. That's not to say there's anything wrong with it. It's just not the right forum.
The reason for raising it, Robin, is that it is adding to our own risk if we have staff from outside our network coming into our network to do certain tasks on our behalf. And it adds to the risk of our organisation and the robustness of our IT infrastructure.
Thank you, Chairman. So that's a fair point. And just give you some reassurance, and I say this as the person who is on a temporary basis, that the Council's Senior Information Risk Officer, we are looking at that. as part of our overall approach to collaboration and making sure that any arrangements, clearly don't put either council at risk in terms of information management, any of the issues that come up in this report. But that's something which is, a very specific piece of work. And again, links back through to the risk management that's undertaken by the Joint Governance Committee. In fact, a lot of these questions around the collaboration and the risks of it do root back through to that Joint Governance Committee and its review of the risks. So again, it's not something that I'm sort of ready to go through in detail in this committee, but if it's something that members are interested in, then perhaps start with looking at the papers that are going to the Joint Governance Committee, because that's where those issues about any risks that arise from collaborating with another council, that's where those things are recorded.
I understand that, and I understand the way that the Joint Collaborative Risk Committee has been set up. However, I think for this committee to fulfil its obligations for Waverley, we need to, at some point, have those assurances that the controls are not impacting Waverley, or the lack of controls, if there are lack of controls, are not impacting Waverley. So I think this is something we would like to take for a further meeting.
Happy to take that to a further meeting, Chair. But what I would say is that any staff who are working on our behalf as part of the collaboration, any Guildford staff go through our security processes, so their access to our network and our information assets are all through our security processes.
That is the sort of assurance of the controls that I think this committee would be looking for. Okay, thank you. Thank you. So if I could then have the recommendation is to note this report, and we've also made some comments and observations. So if we agree to note this report, thank you. Which takes us on to internal audit. Iona.
Thank you, Chair. Just as a reminder for those members that might have been on this committee in March, and as an introduction to those that weren't, in March of each year, what we usually bring to you is the proposed annual audit plan. So it's looking to the upcoming year, and sets out those audit systems that we've agreed with management through a robust assessment process will be covered. So as I say, in March of this year, you agreed as a committee, you approved the 24-25 audit plan. A lot's happened since March, albeit we are only just halfway through June. What we've done since March is taken time to reflect on the continuing viability, I suppose, of producing the plan for you a year in advance, because some of the discussions by the time we get to actually do the system under review would have been held 15, 16 months prior. And reflecting back on the 23-24 plan that came in March 23, actually there was a significant amount of changes made to that plan. And each of those changes do get reported to you as a committee through the progress report. However, the increasing number of changes and the frequency with which the changes are made are becoming more operationally difficult for both the council and ourselves in terms of adjusting resourcing, timing, picking up new key contacts to actually just keep the audit work moving through the course of the year. And also there's general changes because the risk profile might have changed or emerging issues are arising. We've also taken time to review for a number of our other clients. We've already moved towards a quarterly planning approach, and that is proving beneficial in terms of making sure that the audit work is timely, it remains relevant for the time period in which it was conducted, and it just necessitates a lot less changes being reported through you as an audit committee. So with that all in mind, the paper that's in front of you this evening sets out in much more detail the rationale and the reasons for moving towards that quarterly planning process. And on the back of that, I've put in front of you this evening what we propose, and it is retrospective for Q1, what the plan would be and what we're proposing to undertake during Q2. So Q1 is retrospective, obviously, because of the passage of time, and we're proposing to transition into this process. Q2 is timely, as we are now just heading into Q2. Q3 I'm proposing will come in September, so that's well in advance of Q3. So it gives you time to, again, to have the discussion with me as needed on what's in, why it's in, any thoughts you may have on that. And Q4 will come in November. So as per the annual plan, you will be getting these quarterly plans in the future in advance of the quarter and the work being commenced. And I'm happy to so in terms of the plan in front of you this evening for Q1 and Q2, the actual only changes made to those plans in terms of the systems in there at the moment to what was approved in March of this year is the introduction of an audit of the annual governance statement, the production of that and the content for 23-24. For those members that were in the March committee, when I presented the plan in March, I did indicate that that change was likely to be made. So this retrospective plan now encompasses that. And also there was some discussion in the March committee about the inclusion of the car parking audit, and that being scheduled for Q4. I see a wry smile to my left there on that. You will note that that is now in for Q2. So that has been brought forward into Q2. So it will be done sooner rather than later. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions, and I am hoping that you will obviously endorse and approve the move to a quarterly planning process.
Thank you, Iona. Any questions? Councillor Davison.
Yes, Rai smiles from this side of the forum. On the item of car parking, I'm a bit taken aback by what the scope is. It's just to make sure that arrangements are in place for the administration of parking charge notices. Just the notices?
So,
or are we looking at ways of revenue collection?
In terms of the fees and the way it's collected, cash, card, etc. Okay. So that scope in the plan there is just the indicative scope. The likely area for where we would concentrate, and this goes back to what I was saying about actually these planning meetings are sometimes very much in advance of when the audit's going to be. So at the time that we had the scoping meeting, the parking charge notices were the particular issue flagged as being of benefit to be having reviewed because there were various changes taking place. However, when we come to do the detailed scoping meeting, once we sit down and say, right, we're now doing this audit, what's it going to be, which will be a collaboration between us on the audit side going, actually, these are key risks, we need to focus in on certain areas, and as well as management putting in what they see their concerns. And from that, we'll come up with the overall scope. So that will determine whether it just still does stay on the issue of penalty charge notices and collections, or whether it does branch out into other general things like collection of income.
We'll wait and get the more detail later on after you've had your discussions with management.
You won't get any further detail per se as a committee on the actual scope of the audit, because that's at the operational level. What you will get in the progress report is just a summary of the audit having been conducted, what it's the overall assurance opinion is, and any of the management actions, the numbers and the tracking on that. If it results in a limited or no assurance opinion, you'll get the executive summary, but you won't get the detail as a committee to approve in terms of the actual scope of the audit.
I do feel that, Chairman, that we ought to have an oversight of what is the actual scope. And if it's just a scope of just looking at the notices, that seems like rather a non-event of internal audit. I think it's important that, I sense it's important that we have a little bit more flesh on what it is that we are reviewing at the end of the day on the completion of the audit.
Okay, I can take that back and consider how I can provide you that information, because you've got to just be a little bit careful as a committee that you're not delving too much into the operational aspects.
I think if you can circulate a broader scoping for that one to the committee outside of the period, that would be helpful.
I shall see what I can do on that.
Councillor Beeman.
Yeah, just a point of information, Chair. There is now an executive working group looking at parking strategy anyway. So I don't like it, we get ourselves muddled up if we're not careful.
Yes, Chair. The car parking executive working group will be looking at a wider scope of car parking. So therefore, that will feed into a lot, the wider scope that you're referring to, Councillor Davidson.
Okay. Councillor Higgins.
Thank you, Irina, for explaining the pivot to quarterly reported. In the report, you said that, or the report says that based on conversation with key stakeholders, review of risk registers, key corporate documents, that's how the plan was formed. We heard earlier that the risk registers have been worked on, so I'm assuming you've got the current risk register, is that correct?
So if you look at that's the background in that planning document, but it does make particular reference to the fact there were no at the time, and as we've just discussed tonight, there are no detailed risk registers that we've been able to take into consideration in forming that plan. However, the risk registers themselves are only one form of risk avenues that we pull from in determining the systems to be covered. But as and when those risk registers do become available and have a degree of maturity, then we can take them into consideration as part of the planning process.
Excellent. Thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you. I think that just reinforces the need for that updated risk register. Any other questions for Iona? If not, could I ask the committee to approve the change of approach to this quarterly internal audit planning and to approve the Q1 and Q2 plans. Great. Thank you very much. So members, that takes us to agenda item 4, which was the supplemental papers that we received on. Oh, I do apologise, Mavis. I have jumped you completely. Mavis is going to give us an update on the status of the financial statements. Apologies.
Apology accepted. Thank you, Chair. So the financial statement update from our external auditors, Grant Thornton, is they will not sign off the 22-23 accounts until the internal investigation at Guildford Council is completed. And the reason is we share the same senior staff. So that's the update as at June 2024.
Thank you. So an update, but frankly, no update in the sense. Can you give us any sense of timings?
We have asked and we have pressed them for timings, and they said that's dependent on when the investigation is concluded. And so they've actually asked us when we think the investigation is going to be concluded, and they would give us a time based off of that.
I guess that is what it is. It's somewhat outside our control. Thank you, Mavis. Which does then lead us on to agenda item 14, which was the supplemental pack.
Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor Parker.
So I mean, that's an example of a risk, very clear risk, you know. We're not getting audited because of what Guildford's doing. And what impact does that have on us if we're not audited?
Just to respond, we have been audited. So the audit for the financial year 22-23 has been completed by the external auditors, but they have refused to sign off the audit up until that investigation is completed. They would like to satisfy themselves that is not going to have any impact on Waverley. So we have actually completed our actual accounting audit, just waiting for sign off.
Thank you. I mean, that's a distinction without a difference. I mean, we're not having a signed off audit because of what's going on in Guildford, even if our accounts are completely up to date and correct. I think that should be on the risk register myself.
It's certainly been on noted in the previous committee that had an impact on that. I think the committee did take some assurance from the work that was done, even though it's not signed off, that there are no concerns from a Waverley perspective. But obviously they've got to have that sign off, which, as you say, is outside our control at the moment. Thank you. Okay, if I then move to item 14, the financial procedure rules. This was a supplement, but members, you will probably have noted that there are there's no report that goes with that, those financial procedures, particularly telling us what we've expected, what we're looking at, and what we're expected to do with that report, whether we're looking to approve it, note it, and so forth. So after some discussions, I am recommending that we pull that report from this committee and put it into the next committee, where we will have a proper report itemizing what we're being asked to look at, what are the differences from the current financial procedures.
Thank you, Chair. So I do believe that the scheduling for this is for full council on the 16th of July. I understand that the item will be taken to the Joint Governance Committee this Thursday. Perhaps the committee might be minded to give their comments via email, and then that will feed into the full council report. Alternatively, maybe more ambitious, another meeting of this committee between now and the 16th of July, minus the 5 days for publication, etc. So that you may consider the item more thoroughly, Chair. So there's just two options for you there.
Will we be told if we're going to go do it by email or whatever, have some guidance as to what it is that we are being asked to A, look at, and B, agree or otherwise here? Because it's quite a detailed document. I couldn't immediately tell, is it a complete update? Is it a brand new version? What are the changes, etc.? So all the things that we normally would expect to be given guidance on aren't here. And I'm not sure how, as a committee, even separately, we can comment unless we have that guidance.
Thank you, Chair. So I will defer to Mavis for more details on what would potentially be provided via the email. But it does sound that your preference, Chair, would be a formal meeting with this committee.
We will be able to provide whatever the chair would prefer or the committee would prefer. So if you would prefer us to come in with a report covering the financial procedure rules and have it as a meeting, we would be happy to do so.
I would ask members to comment on that. What I'm hearing is that you can provide us with the report that should go with this. What I'm not hearing is whether that is you're requiring us to approve this financial or to just simply note it. I think that's quite an important difference for whether members would feel that they can review this and individually respond to you with an approval or otherwise, or whether members feel that a specific meeting is required and whether that is required by the Constitution.
I believe an approval would be required. So we would be looking to have an approval of this committee for adoption by full council.
In which case, Chair, your only option really is a formal meeting of the committee.
Councillor Davison.
We already have existing, I sense, existing procedures in place. So what the chair seems is asking for is, are there any differences between what's being proposed here against what is in the past? Because I think, I may be being rather naive here, but I have every confidence in predecessors as to what they've approved. And if all we're asking for is to look at what has changed, that might be much easier for us as committee members to approve. The other question at the back of my mind is procedures. I guess Grant Thornton they review our procedures as part of their external audit. So if they are approving the procedures, it's ready for us just to note. And if they are they, or do they not look at our procedures?
They do look at our procedures, but they look at our procedures that have already been through Audit Risk Committee and full council, and we have them published as financial regulations, which we do have. This is a new document that has been proposed as part of the review of the Constitution. This is in conjunction with a new review for contract procurement rules and the scheme of delegation. So this is different. This is going to be is going to be right on top in terms of the constitution. And then we're going to have to change our financial regulations to align with this new document that is being put in place. So this is a little different from what we have, what the auditors have seen in the past and have reviewed. So this is completely new for Waverley.
Well, this is a much more complex document to look at. And you know, I look at one bit, intellectual property. Rules around there, but there's no actual rule which says, apart from assistant directors will ensure that their staff are aware of the council's rights over intellectual property. I find it a bit strange, this, and I find it very complex for me as a non-accountant to look through and say, yep, I approve it. So I think we're being asked to do something which may well be beyond our competence.
I'm sensing that in order to meet the other deadlines we're being told about, the only alternative is to have a separate committee meeting where we can consider this. But I actually think you should bear in mind Councillor Davidson's comments, and indeed, you know, my read of this. I had a number of questions. So it wasn't as if this was just going to be a tick box. There are questions that are going to be asked by this committee. So I think if we need to meet that deadline, then the only option is to have a specific committee meeting scheduled, you say, before the 16th of July.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Beeman.
What's so special about the 16th of July? I mean, could it be later for that?
Thank you, Councillor. So that's the full council date where this document it's hoped would be approved with the rest of the changes following the review of the Constitution.
You want to be railroaded, that's all.
Are members agreeable to that suggestion, or the alternative is to tell council and so forth that we have not had the opportunity to agree, and therefore we haven't agreed it?
We've noted it. I only came back from holiday on Friday, so I'm still catching up the detail. But I sense really that this is an awful lot to absorb and put ourselves in a position to properly comment on and agree, rather than, as the chairman says, tick box. Yes, we've noted it. Let's go on.
Chair, can I just point out that in order to meet the 16th of July deadline, even if we had the meeting on the 15th of July, the reports would have to be in by the 5th of July, which is the day after the general election, or, you know, the agenda would have to be published by the 5th of July, which does leave us an awful lot of time.
So, thank you, Chair. So Mavis, you said that it's actually for approval, but the terms of reference at 3.113, the committee is to review and make recommendations to full council. So it's not specific that they have to approve, which means, Chair, you have a bit of discretion and wriggle room in the sense that if we take the option that it's emailed to you with a thorough report on the context, then you can make comments. It's a recommendation if you so choose around the document. That's also an option if the time frame seems to be unworkable.
So what I'm hearing there is that we would not be required to approve it, but we can make observations, and that's all that is the requirement for the council. Seems a bit unhappy, if I can phrase it like that.
I beg to differ on that, and the reason is for our audit purposes, we would require the Audit and Risk Committee to approve any financial procedure rules before it goes to full council.
The only thing I'll say, it's not the letter of the Constitution. I'm trying to be solution focused here.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the responsibility to approve the Constitution, and this falls in the Constitution, sits with full council. And you'll be aware, Chair, that you have delegated powers from full council.
I'm not sensing here a comfort level in approving or this document as stands or without a proper consideration. I'm hearing that we haven't got the time to do it before that committee. So if it is at council, I am happy to talk at council as to why this committee has not been able to make an approval, if an approval is what is being sought.
Your call, Chair.
Okay. That's my call. I can't, I feel we're being potentially railroaded into doing something that I'm sensing not just me, but I think other members of the committee are not comfortable with. And it's regrettable we're in this situation, but that is the situation. Unless you can find another solution for us in the interim.
I probably minded to explore the email option that I suggested if our deputy 151 officer thinks that there is any flexibility on that. That's probably more desirable than not being presented with support or certainly involvement with this committee to the full council.
If the sectional officer is agreeable to that, I'm certainly comfortable. If the rest of the committee is, that we have the opportunity to comment on a report through email to the officers to enable the comments of the committee to be presented at council, even though it will not be a formal approval. Councillor Higgins.
I'm not entirely clear why the 16th of July is so vital in terms of time frame. We've seen throughout the past 12 months sort of constitutional changes in multiple different council meetings. So what's so special about the 16th of July?
So it's proposed for the remainder of the changes, but point taken, actually, it may be necessary to go to a later meeting of the full council. It just will delay implementation days, and I don't know if there's any knock-on consequence of that for our finance colleagues.
We would actually support if it's delayed and taken to a later date to give it enough time because of the importance of this document. Thank you.
Okay, so if I'm hearing that we may be, that you're going to try the email, but otherwise as far as I'm concerned, the 16th of July deadline, if you need our approval, I feel that has to be postponed.
Thank you, Chair. So for the purposes of the minutes, the decision today would be to see whether or not it's adequate for the committee to comment via email. And if that's not adequate, then it will be considered at a meeting of this committee at a future date, which is going to be after the 16th of July. Is that right, Chair?
Correct.
I'm grateful. Thank you.
Essentially, what we're saying here is that we're quite relaxed about this as a document as it currently stands, as a stopgap or as an interim, and we will comment on it and approve on it at some later date and maybe update it. Because as Councillor Higgins has pointed out, we're constantly fiddling around with the edge of the Constitution any road as we evolve our relationship with Guildford. and as you know, as we advance ourselves. So I see nothing wrong with that on that to go forward on that basis.
Thank you, Chair. So I don't think we're actually doing that because the document hasn't been considered by this committee. So I think there's a slight distinction in that it won't be approved for use until the meeting of the full council. But what we're actually saying is that we're trying to get the input of this committee into that document at a date, either via email before the 16th, or if that's not possible and not adequate, then at a meeting that which will be after the 16th of July. Before the 16th of July, that's correct. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Apologies for the complexity of that discussion, but obviously an important one. Discussion on the annual governance statement. This is a standing item enabling us to give heads up on the AGS statement, discuss or recommend to officers areas that we think should be considered in it. We're not, as far as I'm aware, being asked to approve anything at this point. This is just an ongoing update of what is an existing document for next year.
Thank you, Chair. So for 23-24, we have brought back the AGS incorporating the requests that were made at the last Audit and Risk Committee meeting in March. And that was to add in 5.3 something about the staff turnover, and 5.4 some more details surrounding the ongoing investigation in Guildford Borough Council. So we would like to know if the audit committee are happy with the changes that have been made, or if there are any more additional changes they will require. And we will be hoping to bring this statement back for sign off at the next Audit and Risk Committee. Thank you.
So this is now a final draft, if you like, for before going for the September committee for sign off.
Yes, please.
So I will open it up then to members as to whether they have any comments or concerns on the draft as presented. I'm just trying to think, because we had two.
You did, Chair. You've had the AGS, revised AGS, and then the second document is the AGS that we looked at in March. So it was to enable you to compare and see the changes.
I'm with you now. I had two comments really. One on page 119, the corporate governance review commissioned by Guildford and undertaken by Solace. The report was published. Has that report been seen by this committee?
Not formally, but it's been published online.
It has. So it is available for this committee to look at. Thank you. The other area that I had, well, I still think probably needs some additional work on was on page 122, the management of the key risks in section 7, I think that needs to be addressed given the state of where we are with our risk management. I don't think that we can necessarily make those statements with the comfort level that is required. Robin.
Just to say, Chair, that the level of detail provided there, that is, from my point of view, I'm happy that the council can make those statements. You'll be able to compare that many of the things we were talking about that are now being developed, and which you saw in the earlier item, and which we're talking about will be coming forward from September onwards. That's not all reflected in this current statement. You would expect that, you know, future iterations of the statement will include that level of detail. But this has been drafted to try and reflect the level that we have at the moment, the approach taken to risk management at the moment.
Okay, but I see the sentence that the risk register is reviewed by the audit committee and used to inform the internal audit plan. I think we just heard that the lack of it it isn't at the moment informing the internal audit plan. And with the best will of the world, we haven't had the review at this committee. So I think that sentence has to go.
Point taken. We will amend accordingly. Thank you.
Any other observations from members? Am I correct, if members do have observations on this and that they can and perhaps should send them in via email to you so that they can be incorporated into the draft and a copy to me, please, as well.
I think that would be to Mavis. If there's any questions specifically about section 7, then I'm happy to comment on that. But general comments, I think, to you, Mavis, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That takes us to item 16, which is the Audit Committee recurrent annual work programme.
Yes, Chair, that's me. Members will see that we have the recurrent annual work programme 24-25 in the agenda pack. This has been circulated to all the officers, and I've asked them to identify reports and where they need to go within the work programme, because we had lots of changes and it had got a little bit messy. So hopefully it looks a little bit neater than it did at the last meeting, and it'll give us a good idea of what items we should be expecting at each meeting.
Thank you, Kimberly.
Yeah, I think my owner's got something to say, Chair.
Right, sorry. Kimberly, I just noticed for September, and it might be that we can have a quick meeting later in the week, but for September, there should be the annual internal audit report for 23-24.
Okay.
Indeed. Okay, so I think the committee will note that annual work programme with that revision. Thank you. So do we need to exclude the press and public?
No items to discuss in exempt.
No others to be exempt session. So I think that takes us to the end of the meeting at 21 minutes 04. Councillor Davison. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.